Mr. Grindstaff?
I also support the concept of vacation, having just completed my own. So I want to echo the chair there. I'd like to ask Kurt Miller to come up and do the legislative report.
For those of you who don't know, Mr. Grindstaff rented an RV and took his wife and 87 grandchildren, or whatever the number
Two grandchildren.
was, all the way across the country. He denies that he met Clarence Thomas and his wife while driving RVs across country. But he refuses to specify that in any... And we look forward to seeing a photograph of Mr. Grindstaff and his family and Clarence Thomas and his family all RVing across America together. Is that...
I look forward to that photograph, too.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I'll keep it short. There hasn't been a whole lot going on since we last convened in July on these matters. But first of all, let me start off with your packet today has an update on the legislative status for our legislation I'm tracking. When we sent out the packet copy on the 13th, it's out of date now. Things are happening daily, so we updated the
are the bills the same, or are there additional bills?
I threw an additional one in, but the other ones are all the same. Status hasn't changed that much, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. There's some activity going on with resurrecting a couple of trailer bills, one in each house. However, the subject matter currently does not pertain to any DSC interests or programs. They're centered around funding parks and CAL FIRE emergency monies for the fires that are burning in California, and some other changes to policy regarding the recycling division, covert conservation, things like that. But I'll keep an eye on them. The addition to your packet is the update on signature for AB 1019, which was signed by the governor last month. This bill pulled DSC out of the Resources Agency, which was part of the governor's reorganization plan that he submitted last spring. So once again, DSC is a standalone agency with its own statute and codes.
I just, as I was groggily going through this binder last night, I just noticed in the stuff, there were a couple of bills that didn't mention the council but are unwatched. One's a Buchanan bill, and I think the second was another Buchanan bill. That's because they were reorganization bills?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep. And finally, an update on SB 1495, which is Senator Wolk's bill on Delta Plan covered actions. The bill was amended Monday after this edition went out. Now, the first edition of the summary for the bills that we did in July had an opposed, which is a staff recommendation. We decided at that point to let it lie still because we knew amendments were coming. The amendments showed up this last Monday, so I recast the recommendation in your packets today to no position after some discussions with staff, senior staff, and Patrick Johnston and others. So that's been changed on your document. The new amendments put some detail in the bill for routine dredging, and it specifies specifically now the depth of the amount of dredging that can be done in the Stockton Channel and the reach along the channel that is permissible for this type of activity. Other than that, the bill hasn't changed to any significant degree. It also has the exemption for leases in it. And
let me explain to members that may not recall what this bill is about. In our plan, we actually have an exemption for certain activities from the covered action requirement based on the fact that we believe that they won't have a significant impact on the co-equal goals. One of the exemptions is for the Port of Stockton and includes maintenance, dredging, and leases based on certain requirements that we put in the plan. At the same time, the legislature's been working on the same issue on a parallel basis, and there have been ongoing negotiations. They are much more specific in this bill than we are in the draft Delta plan. Just so everybody's aware, that's what this is about.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, let's see. Mr. Grindstaff, you want to do...
Okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
Questions of
That
Mr. Miller? Questions? Okay.
Right.
Joe, you want to do the contracts update?
I just want to mention that we have, as we routinely do every quarter, we list all of the contracts that we have ongoing.
And these are multi-year...
Yes, most of
Okay.
them are multi-year contracts, and we update anything that's new. We have the date that the contract was entered into here, so anybody can see what the money is. As you'll recall, we do have a requirement that things that are more than $500,000 come to the council for approval before we can award the contract. Right. Other than that, we do them on a relatively routine basis, but we do disclose what's going on. Okay. I guess before I go to I do want to update you on the budget change proposal. I want to ask Chris if he has anything on the legal side to update us on. Nothing on that. Okay. I also want to explain the BCP process and the process that we're underwriting.
BCP.
BCP is a budget change proposal process. And in state government, when you're looking at your staffing and your budgets, the way you do it is you actually make a proposal for what your budget will be to the governor's office, to the Department of Finance. And they actually then review it and approve it or disapprove it or amend it or do whatever they're going to do. And that ultimately makes its way into the governor's budget in January, which he releases to the legislature. The legislature then approves, disapproves, amends, does what they're going to do with the budget. So we are now in the process of doing a budget change proposal for our budget moving forward after the Delta Plan is complete. And a significant part of our funding up till now has been based on doing the Delta Plan. We expect the Delta Plan will be complete, and we have to convert what our staff are doing and modify how we're operating to actual implementation in this next budget year. So we have a budget change proposal that is moving ahead. And the way the process works, it makes the governor's office really nervous if we talk about what our budget change proposals are until they actually approve it for release to the legislature. So that's why we don't actually bring all the documents here and produce everything for you. But I did want to let you know that we're in that process and that it will involve converting staff that currently work on the Delta Plan over into implementation, kind of reshuffling the way things go, and will require some of our staff that currently are being paid through bond funds to be paid in different ways, probably through the general fund. So that process is underway. Will continue to take several months.
Yeah. Hank, did you have a question? No. Okay. Any questions of Joe on that? Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the contracts, Joe, we have a firm that is doing the BDCP review for us, but under the science program, we have a number of individuals maybe affiliated with firms, and those amount to some $250,000 for. Is that separate and apart review for the BDCP than the parties that have reported this council at different times? I mean, have we got other people?
So
reviewing?
what we have is we have Arcadis,
right,
which is an engineering firm which we hired to do review of BDCP. In addition to that, we have other scientists who have been contracted and paid for typically by federal agencies to do independent reviews of some of the science underlying BDCP. The most relevant part is the effects analysis. And what we do is actually, I think it's the Bureau of Reclamation, but anyway, they contract with us. I'm looking at our science. Yes. That's correct. Okay. Bureau of Reclamation contracts with us.
The science program staff in the audience just nodded and shouted out, yes, that's correct.
So it is correct. So they contract with us to provide independent review. We actually then put under contract scientists who come and sit on panels and evaluate those parts of BDCP, in this case the effects analysis, and write reports, and they have been doing that for the last several months. I expect that will continue and will actually be an important part of our evaluation. And one of the challenges we will have is to make sure that we don't duplicate services, so that Arcadis does what Arcadis does and uses what we get from our independent scientists. And as you'll recall, the legislation actually calls on the Independent Science Board to do its own independent review, which they then forward to us and to the Department of Fish and Game. And so they have been having long discussions, and we've been working on how we can make sure that we do that efficiently.
So the information that they're working on, that'll be compiled, obviously be a part of the analysis that will be forwarded to the council, but then that will be, there'll be a compilation of information at some juncture, yet to be determined obviously, but that the council then will have this body of information from the scientists, from other folks who will do an analysis, including Arcadis, that'll come together in some format that'll, when this body has before it the BDCP.
It will, and and we're going to talk about BDCP
right, that's what.
extensively today. But part of
After lunch.
So part of what we're anticipating is that we will write a comment letter to BDCP as a part of the environmental review process that will attempt to encapsulate all of the issues that we think need to be raised about BDCP.
Now, we've sent, 4 letters, scoping letters to date? I think it's 4.
It's
3 or 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're anticipating at least one more, maybe more than
I'm
that.
anticipating at least one more, and this one I would expect would be fairly extensive, fairly detailed. We're talking about reviewing a 10,000-page document, and under the law, the council has this responsibility to be, quote, a responsible agency, and also potentially to review and be the appeals agency on approval of BDCP. So our thought is that when we do our comments as a responsible agency, we ought to look at all of the things that might be appealed to us and make sure that we cover all of those so that there are no surprises.
Just one other question. So the folks that are under these contracts support both the Independent Science Board, the panel, as well as then will provide information with background for this council's consideration.
For this council, and it all becomes public. What they do is they release publicly their results. They send the results directly to the Bureau of Reclamation, who asked for the work to be done.
And we have, this anticipates Dr. Goodwin's report on the science program later, but we also have periodically received requests from other agencies to do things that are not directly BDCP related, but the subject matter is the delta ecosystem, and so on.
And he'll talk about some of that today.
And that, in fact, is likely to continue, and we have no idea right now what those requests might be, but the assembling of a neutral panel of experts on a particular subject is one of the duties we have statutorily, and if that happened and there's a reimbursement that comes from an agency, that then would be reflected and flagged in your next quarterly report.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're saying that under these contracts, because the Bureau requested some of this, that some of these dollars that are put forth as being the contractual amount could be reimbursed and so we show as receivables?
Yes, we probably get in an average year $1 million in receivables from other agencies.
Lauren is shaking her head left and right and up and
$500,000.
$500,000.
$500,000.
All of those are, we've been reimbursed.
Ms. Hastings, you have to get to the microphone to talk.
This is Dr. Lauren Hastings, who is our science
Is this
program.
on?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, all of the ones that show up as BDCP review experts, we've been reimbursed for those by the Bureau of Reclamation.
Yeah.
And that panel, just to make sure you're aware, has already met and been reviewing the BDCP effects analysis, the drafts, and they have 2 reports out already that are on our website. We expect one more review from that panel of the next version of that Chapter 5 in the BDCP plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on it? Randy?
Joe, in regards to the budget change process, it strikes me that as a state agency, we're undergoing something somewhat unique in terms of our funding needs. Do you anticipate any problems, challenges with that? Or is it simply a matter of documenting this major shift from planning to implementation?
So far, so good. But, the challenge is the state's budget situation is really bad. And depends on what happens in the election, depends on lots of external factors. There's nothing that I see internally within the administration or within ongoing operations that will cause a major hang-up. But there are the fact that the state is financially in such dire straits. Maybe that's the wrong terminology, but given the fiscal realities of the state, I think we always need to be aware that that could have an impact on us, be prepared to figure out what we do in different scenarios so that it is the real world.
Okay, further questions? All right, next item, Mr. Grindstaff, in your report. There's a copy of the Water Board's work plan hearing notice workshop request that was distributed, but not clear to me whether that's as part of your report or Dr. Goodwin's report.
That's part of Dr. Goodwin's report.
All right.
So I have nothing.
Okay.